Okay, good evening, everybody. Let's start learning Pirkei Avos together again, which is the minhag to do between Pesach and Shavuos. And Bez Hashem will go past Shavuos. We're starting a little later than usual. We also, depending on the size crowd that we have right now, we have about, let's say, between 10 and 15 of us. So if there's any questions, please raise your hand. We'll, the less people you have, the little more intimate you can get, and more back and forth we can have. So that's appreciated as well. All right. So let's introduce Masechta Pirkei Avos. We're back to our old friend that we did every year. Unfortunately, last year we canceled because of COVID. So let's just give a short introduction. Why is Meseches Avos called Avos? Why is it called Avos? The word Avos we know means fathers. There's times in halacha where also the word Avos can mean main categories. Okay, like there's 39 Avos malachos, 39 primary categories of malacha work that is forbidden to do on Shabbos. So Avos really takes us back to our source. Okay? Now, there's a very interesting idea from Rav Shamshin Rafal Hirsch, Zechron Levracha. Rav Hirsch says the following. It says in the Torah, there's a command, Peru Urevu. There's a mitzvah for a man to have children. The word Peru is to be fruitful, and Revu is to multiply. What's the difference between Peru and Revu? What's the difference between these two? So Rav Hirsch explains as follows. The word Peru means to be fruitful. A tree is fruitful. Horses are fruitful. Fish are fruitful. Anything can be fruitful. The word Peru is more in the numbers. But to be Peru, just to have children, is in and of itself not the whole mitzvah of the Torah. The mitzvah of the Torah is Peru urevu. Revu means not to be fruitful, but to multiply oneself into others. It's the quality that we give into others, which, by the way, is why a Rebbe is called a Rebbe and why a Rav is called a Rav, because that's what the word means, from the word rov, to expand and to make more. It's the job of a Rebbe to expand themselves and to expand their teaching into others. That's why a Rebbe is called a Rebbe. Okay? So the mitzvah of Peru Urevu is not just to have children, it's to multiply oneself into others, which means that a person, even if they don't have children, can be Revu. We can multiply ourselves into others. We can still have a chelek, have a part in this mitzvah. Interestingly, all we need to do is look at as Masechta Avos. The word Avos means fathers. It's teachings of our fathers. Who are our fathers? The sages who are about to teach us all about life and what it means to live like a Yid. Are we related to them? Not necessarily. Maybe yeah, maybe no. Maybe some of us can trace ourselves directly back. I'm sure we all can eventually. But they're called Avos not because they actually give birth to us, but because they are our fathers, because they are expanding themselves into us through their teachings. It's an unbelievable concept, a beautiful concept, where we can be fathers, we can be parents to others without being blood parents. Avos. And interestingly, as we've said many times, a number of the Mishnayos begin with the words, Hu Haya Omer. So Hu Haya Omer would generally be translated as he used to say. And then it goes on to the lesson. This sage used to say, Hu Haya Omer, he used to say. But there, I believe it's the Meiri, might be somebody else will explain this as we move along. I forget who says this, explains, if you translate the words Hu Haya Omer, that we'll see in the Mishnayos literally, it really means Hu Haya, he was, Omer, what he said. Hu Haya Omer. This sage that we're speaking about was this message. They lived this message. They didn't just, he used to say, no, he was this statement. This tzaddik, this sage was that they embodied that statement. And that's why this sage is Avos, is our fathers. Okay? So we're looking back at our Masorah in Pirkei Avos. We're not just learning the halacha, the ins and outs of do this, don't do this, as far as following halacha. Avos is about allowing the chachamim to really expand themselves into us, which is why it's called, and there's a few different explanations of this, but this is why it's called Pirkei Avos, the teachings of our fathers, because they are our father the same way that we can be a father and we can be a parent to others, even if we are not necessarily related. Okay, so let's begin. There's a custom before each Perek, before each chapter of Pirkei Avos, to recite a Mishnah from Sanhedrin. Okay, and the purpose of reciting this Mishnah is to remind ourselves that even though there's a lot of work to do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, and we automatically have a chelek in Olam Haba. Let's read this through. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek li Olam Haba. Every Jew has a chelek, has a portion in the world to come, in Olam Haba. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, V'amei chulam tzadikim, your nation are all righteous. Every Yid is special. Every Yid is we are inborn tzadikim. A tzaddik is somebody who slips and pulls themselves back together. La'olam yirshu aretz. They will forever inherit the land, either referring to Eretz Yisrael, but primarily referring to the eternal land, referring to Gan Eden. Netzer matoi. They are the sapling of my eye. And Netzer matoi. They are a branch of my plantings. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that Klal Yisrael is a piece of me. Every Yid is a piece of me. Maaseh Yodai, they are my handiwork lehispa'er that I take pride in. There's nothing more precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than a Yidullah. Nothing more precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than the neshama, than each and every one of us, the neshama of a Yid. Okay, now what we need to recognize is, even though this Mishnah is quoted and meant to give us chizuk, we know, for those of us who have been learning Bolvavi together, which Be'ez Hashem we're restarting on Thursday, we know that every person's chelek in Olam Haba does look different. So even though we automatically receive a chelek in Olam Haba, it's still up to us to determine what that plot in Olam Haba looks like, where we sit and how connected we are to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, here we go. Let's begin Mishnah Aleph. Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Fascinating Mishnah. So crucial, so important. So many messages. Moshe Kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moshe accepted the Torah from Sinai. Umesara liYoshua. And passed it to Yehoshua. And then the Mesorah, the transmission, goes from Yehoshua to the Zekanim, so on and so forth. Let's pause for a minute. Look at the very beginning of the Mishnah. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. It does not say that Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe as Mesorah. That wasn't Hashem giving it to Moshe is not through Mesorah. The Mesorah starts when Moshe gives it to Yehoshua. That's one thing we're going to focus on. An additional thing to notice is that it doesn't say Moshe Kibel Torah May Hashem. Rather, it says Moshe accepted the Torah from Sinai. Is Sinai a person? Is Sinai Hashem? Very unique. Okay, so I want to focus on these 2 points. First of all, why it says Moshe Kibel Torah mi Sinai, and also that when Moshe received it from Sinai, which we know ultimately is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it uses an expression of Kabbalah, of acceptance. And afterwards, we start using the word Mesorah. We start using the word of tradition. Okay, so let's focus on these 2 things. First of all, what is the Mesorah? What is the transmission of Torah Sheba'al Peh? We know as firm Yidden, there's Torah Sheba'Ksav and there's Torah Sheba'al Peh. There's the written Torah and the oral Torah. Many people, many people, unfortunately think that the oral Torah, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, is something that came about from teacher to student, through all later generations. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. That is wrong. That's not Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's the Masorah that went from Moshe to Yeshua and Yeshua to the elders, as we'll see as we read along the Mishna. But Torah Sheba'al Peh itself, the reality of the oral Torah, was given at the same exact time. The entire Torah Sheba'al Peh was given at the same exact time as Torah Sheba'al. It's not something that developed over the generations. The written Torah and the oral Torah were both given and handed to Moshe at Har Sinai. The Rambam, okay, in his introduction to Mishnah Torah, the Rambam writes that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the same time that Hashem gave the verse, the pasuk to Moshe Rabbeinu, he also gave it along with all of the drushos and all of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So Moshe received the Torah and all of the Torah Sheba'al Peh as well. It is actually impossible to receive a Torah Sheba'al. You cannot get a written Torah until you have an oral Torah. I'll prove it to you. All right? I'll prove it to you. The written Torah itself makes no sense without the oral Torah. Okay? For example, when it says that a man should wear tefillin, which is a word, the word tefillin itself doesn't appear in the psukim. There's nowhere in the Torah that it's used the word tefillin. It says you should take litotafos, the os al yadecha, you wrap it on your arms. Right? It says you should put a os, you should put a sign on your arms. It's a zikaron, as a reminder, totafos, between your eyes. Make totafos between your eyes. What in the world does this mean? What is it? What is the sign? What are these ornaments that I'm putting on me? It doesn't say that. That doesn't explain anything. It needs to be that the oral Torah was given at the same exact time, so Moshe Rabbeinu could even understand what the written Torah was. Again, to reiterate, written Torah and oral Torah did happen in its entirety at Har Sinai, except some things were written into the verse and some things were said out loud from Hashem's mouth to Moshe, that Moshe should pass it on orally. Why there needs to be an oral Torah is a sheer in and of itself, but there's no way for the written Torah to be transmitted unless there are some things transmitted orally. That is true as well. And just to bring out this point of the written Torah needing the oral Torah, there's a beautiful Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph 31a in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos brings a story. Many of us may be familiar with the story of a non-Jew that came to Hillel and Shammai. Right. So first the non-Jew comes to Shammai and he says, "How many Torahs do you have?" And Shammai says, "There's two Torahs. There's the written Torah and the oral Torah." To which the non-Jew says, "I'll take the written Torah, but I don't want the oral Torah. I don't believe in it. I don't want the oral Torah." Okay, so Shammai chases him out. Yeah, get out of here. No such thing. No, you can't have a written Torah and oral Torah. Okay. Says the Gemara, the non-Jew comes to Hillel with the same request. Hillel saw that he was sincere, even though he wanted the written Torah without the oral Torah. Hillel was confident. There's a whole reason why he ultimately converted him. Apparently, Hillel was confident that he was able to get rid of this person's doubts in the oral Torah. And Hillel converts him, but he says, "I'll convert you if you accept the written Torah, but I want you to come learn with me. All right, you're going to be my chavusa." So what happens? Says the Gemara, the first day, Hillel converts him. And he says, "You know how to read Hebrew?" He says, "No." "Okay, I'll teach you the Aleph base." So he comes in, he sits down. He's Jewish now. Hillel converted him. He said he's going to take the written Torah, right? Awesome. So what happens? Hillel says, "Listen, this is an Aleph, this is a Beis, this is a Gimel, this is a Dalid. Go home and review. You ready? This shape is a Aleph, this shape is a Beis, this shape is a Gimel, Dalit, so on and so forth. Go do your homework. Yeah, go Chazar. The Chazara, go review." Okay. So the guy goes home, he does his homework, and he comes back the next day for class. Hillel points to the Aleph and he says, "This is a Gimel." And he points to the Beis and he says, "This is a Dalit." And he points to the Gimel and he says, "This is an Aleph." The guy's like, "What? But yesterday you told me that shape is an Aleph and that shape is a Beis and that shape is a..." "I don't understand." Says Hillel, "Beautiful. You see that you need to rely on me as the Chachamim for you to recognize the letters properly, the same way you need to rely on me and trust me that an Aleph is an Aleph and a Beis is a Beis and a Gimel is a Gimel, so too you need to trust me about the truth of the Torah Shebaal Peh, which is going to be transmitted Rebbe to student. There is always going to be parts of Torah that need to be passed down orally. It demands our trust in the Chachamim, because without trust in the Chachamim and without the understanding of the emes of the oral Torah, nothing ultimately is true. Because you can question anything. How do I know an Aleph is an Aleph? Who says? Where's the Messiah? Where's show me? Maybe an Aleph makes a tough sound. maybe anything, right? You need a Torah Shebaal Peh passed down Rebbe to student in order for there to be understanding and trust and connection in anything. Okay, so what does it mean? Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Let's go back to our questions. So here we go. Moshe accepted. Why does it use the word accepted? First of all, because when you deal with a Rebbe and student, when we deal with human beings, you can have a Rebbe and a Talmud. You can have a teacher and the student together. When we're learning from Hashem and we're learning from God, we can't fathom that. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of the great, above all, Moshe, the great Moshe, to say that he was somehow connected to the greatness of Hashem, like as in a Masorah form, is impossible. The word kibel is telling us that we as humans need to be humble. And if Hashem says something, but there's no way we can ultimately wrap our heads around it. We need to take Hashem's words as a Kabbalah. It's a Kabbalah. It's not a Masorah. It's a Kabbalah. We just take it in. I'm a Kabbalah. I take it. When it comes to a Rebbe, okay, that's part of the Masorah. You question the Rebbe. You answer the Rebbe. Ultimately, we know that the Rebbe is the one who's closer to our Sinai and has the truth. Great. But Moshe kibel from Sinai and then passes it over to the students. And we also asked, why is it called Sinai? Why say Moshe accepted the Torah from Sinai? So there's a few different interpretations. One message the Gemara in Megillah tells us is to let us know that in order to be makabel the Torah, the same way Har Sinai was the most humble of all mountains, you need humility in order to accept the Torah. We need humility in order to understand, like we said before, that ultimately in our minds, there's no way to fully grasp anything. And Moshe himself, who was Anav Mikol Adam, the most humble of all people, learned this from Har Sinai. And that's what it means, Moshe Kiba. What he get? Not only the Torah, but he accepted from Sinai this lesson of the importance of being humble as we approach the words of Torah. Humble means, very important, to be humble doesn't mean I humble myself in front of people who are equal to me, lesser than me, so on. So that's how our minds think. Oh, I'm a humble person. Yeah, look, I humble myself in front of people greater than me. No, humbling ourselves in front of people greater than us is called being a realist. Yeah, I'm humble because that person's greater than me. To be humble means to even humble ourselves in front of those who are not. We don't view necessarily as if they are greater than us. Okay, let's keep moving on in the Mishnah. So Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Moshe accepted the Torah from Sinai. Umesara liYoshua. And he gave it over to Yehoshua. He handed it over to Yehoshua. He gave him the power, the ability to keep transmitting the Torah to all of Klal Yisrael. And Yeshua passed it over to the Zikanim. Uzikanim l'Neviim. And the Zikanim passed it over to the Neviim, the era of the prophets. We now are going from Rebbe to Talmud, from teacher-student, and we're moving fast among the generations. Now we're going to the period of the Neviim, which ended towards the beginning of the Second Temple. Uneviim Masrua La'anshe Knesset Gadola. and the Nevi'im handed it over, passed it over to the men of the Great Assembly. We're now towards the end of the era of the second Mesa Mikdash. We know the second temple lasted for 420 years, so we're now moving along in the terms of centuries. All right, and now that we got down to the men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Gedola, who received all of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Now let's learn from their lives. And here we go. Hey, Mamru Shleisha Devar. The Anshe Knesset Hagedola embodied and focused on the following three things. It says, if you translate it literally, it means they said three things. Now, these are the men of the Great Assembly. They wrote the whole siddur. They said a lot more than just three things. So, Hey Mamru Shleisha Devar means that they gave three things that every Jew is supposed to focus on in order to be the best yid that we can possibly be. And that is, number one, Heve misunim badin. Be very careful in judgment. This does not only refer to a judge. This means how we judge others and how we judge ourselves. Be very misunim badin. Don't be quick to judge. Unfortunately, this has to be stressed, and a class like Pirkei Avos we're going to take into our personal lives, even though in the drushas that we give in shul and other times we stay away from current events and world affairs, and we focus on the pasuk, and each of us walk away with our own view and understanding of that pasuk and how it involves our own lives. But over here, we have to be very, very, we really need to take this in and talk and discuss how careful we need to be of Misunim Adin. Be careful and deliberate and slow in judgment when we live in a world of pictures, snapshot videos, people jumping to conclusions, rushing to decisions from a small clip, from seeing somebody involved in something else that's going on. I just had this recently, interestingly. I was walking I walked into 7-Eleven on Olive. I walked in with my kids, and I saw somebody who's, sometimes comes to shul, wonderful person who, they walk around like they're an observant person, and, they keep all the basic mitzvahs. You never know what goes behind the person's door, as we're going to learn in Pirkei Avos. Don't judge a person until you reach their place. And the Mefarshim say it means because everything might look good on the outside, but behind closed doors, they might look fantastic outside. But once you get into their house, you realize they're actually monsters, and they're not nice people, and the whole thing's a farce. Meanwhile, we're honoring them at all the dinners, but in their own homes, there's unfortunately, domestic things that are going on. But be it as it may, so this person ultimately looked, and I saw them purchasing I thought they kept kosher, I thought I'm their rabbi, but they don't always ask me questions. Some people you could tell some people you're their rabbi. Something goes on in their life, they give you a call, they discuss it, right? Other people, you become their rabbi when they're in trouble. Other people, they never ask. They're just like, all right, we'll see. We'll see every once in a while. We'll see on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So I walked into 7-Eleven, and this person is standing there buying hot dogs from the roller, that rolling machine, in front of 7-Eleven. Oh, okay, fine. Don't say nothing, Maybe okay, but you put in the files. You file it away for the appropriate time. I walk out with my Slurpees, with me and my kids, and this person walks over to me and they say, Rabbi, I don't know what you were thinking when I bought the hot dogs, but I want you to know that I have a non-Jewish woman working for me, and she heard I was going to 7-Eleven. She asked me if I could pick up a hot dog for her for lunch. I just want you to know I keep kosher. You don't need to be concerned about me. And I was like, I said, oh, Baruch Hashem, I didn't know whether to, I don't know. I'm keeping an eye. I am your rabbi. I got it, but you got to be deliberate. You got to be careful. You have to file things away. Doesn't mean you ignore something necessarily, but you put it, You have to balance things out, right? Is it? Don't be hasty. Don't be so quick to judge what's going on, what happened in that in any particular situation. Every single one of us is a judge on a constant basis. We're always doing this. And it does, interestingly, it doesn't say don't judge others. Because sometimes you need to notice, rather it says you got to be very careful. And we know the Torah commands us, when you judge, judge favorably. B'tzedek tishbay damisecha. Not don't judge. When you don't judge anybody, we had this discussion in Perkei Avos before. A person says, I'm non-judgmental. Very often it means you don't even care. If you care about somebody, you notice what's going on. You're not going to ignore it. But you got to be very careful to judge it favorably. Having misunim badin. Not only, it's referring to a judge, true. A judge should be deliberate in judgment. But every single one of us needs to be careful about what we're looking at and judge it accordingly. In addition to that, an additional pshat in having misunim badin is be very careful, be very deliberate in how you handle a situation, how you handle a din, how you handle a case, a story that comes your way. In the big green art scroll on Pirkei Avos, they bring down a story of Rav Menachem Tendler, who he was a big paisik, and on Erev Pesach, a woman sent her grandson to him with a shaila. And usually, people have their whole Masorah, how they make charaises for the Pesach Seder, make charaises. This type of apple, that type of apple, you put in the walnuts or the almonds, you put in what type of wine you put in, the cinnamon. So here was her shaila. The shaila this woman sent her of Telushkin was, she sent her grandson on Erev Pesach. She forgot to buy cinnamon to put into the charaises. Are she allowed to make charaises with no cinnamon? That's her big shaila of the day. All right? So what's the answer? Of course. Yeah. Tell Bubby it's okay. Yeah. Go tell Bubby. There's no mitzvah. You don't need cinnamon in here. What did Rav Telushkin do? What did he do? He walked over to the shelf, pulled out a Shulchan Aruch, flips through it for a few minutes. He finally closes it, and he tells the grandson, the young child, he says, tell your Bubby that this year, because she forgot, this year it's okay. This year it's okay. But next year, she should be very careful to buy cinnamon right when after Purim. Buy cinnamon in advance, Kashla Pesach cinnamon. This way she won't forget. Okay? Then Rav Telushkin goes to the side room and he takes out a bottle of wine and he says, tell your Bubby this wine's for her. She should have a good yom. Okay? So why is this a story? I'll tell you why. Because Rav Telushkin knew in this situation, this is having misunim, be very deliberate, very careful. If he were to just say, no problem, go home, no problem. The grandson or even the grandmother would think, it was a dumb question. And they're going to be embarrassed to start asking questions again. By taking somebody's question seriously, even if it's not such a serious question, in the big picture, it's going to encourage people to keep asking questions, because there's times where a big question will come up and be like, it's probably a dumb question. I don't want to go ask. Having misunim, and this doesn't only apply to Rabbanim. It doesn't apply to these situations, right? It applies to interactions we have with others. When we give a snide remark, I'll tell you a similar story. I have my own family, my own kids. This is probably going back, I'm not the best with years, I would say 8-9 years ago. 8-9 years ago. All right, we're living in St. Louis. I'm driving the kids to Torah Prep Girls School, soon to be Olav Hashem. Okay, because they're moving to McNair, Mirz Hashem. So I'm driving the kids to school. I don't know who was in the cars. Yaakov, Leah, and the twins were. Who knows? Anyway, so we're driving up Blackberry behind the McNair building. You know where it like bends around and hits Swarthmore and then Groby. So we're driving around. I got 4 kids in the car, and one of the younger kids says, "Look, a tree. Is a tree? Okay, there's a tree." And I said, "Wow, yeah, there's a tree. Yeah, that's a big tree. Okay," whatever I said. I don't know why I had this epiphany at that moment where I thought to myself, Baruch Hashem, I don't have any adolescents in the car right now. You know why? Because if this kid were to have an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old in the car, and they say, "Look, a tree," you know what an adolescent may say? "We all know it's a tree. What do you say? Dumb tree, so." Right? What does it put into that young child's mind? Don't talk anymore. Don't express yourself. Don't say something when you feel you have something to say. It's very important in our daily lives to be misunim badim, to judge situations carefully, not to shun, not to mock, not to put people down, so on and so forth, not to, otherwise they're going to be uncomfortable the next time. Very, very important, beautiful, and powerful message. Having misunim badim. Secondly, the ha'amidu talmidim harbe. Ha'amidu means to stand up many students. It doesn't just mean to teach others. How do you stand somebody up? By building them, allowing them to make their own mistakes and ultimately gain independence. You don't want we don't want people that are always dependent and can't earn independence. We want people who could become independent. That doesn't mean to have many students, teach many students. No, the goal is not to teach. The goal is that students should learn. And there's a big difference between a person who walks into a classroom saying, "I'm going to teach these kids," and a person who walks into a classroom and says, "These kids are going to learn." Because if I want to teach, that doesn't necessarily mean they're learning. But if I'm focused on that child learning, then how I teach is going to vary. Because the goal is not for me to teach. The goal is for this person to learn. And this applies, the classroom, again, is just a mushal. It's just a parable. It's how we interact with others. It's what we're doing. It's, am I interacting in a way where I'm allowing this person to stand up, the midu, stand up and gaining their ultimate own independence. V'asu siyag l'Torah. And number 3, they taught us v'asu siyag l'Torah, to make a fence around Torah. What does that mean? So many of us may read this Mishna and say, that's probably what the rabbinic commandments are. You know, the Torah is the red line, and the Rabbanim make halachos midrabbanan to protect the Torah. So Vasiyag make fences for the Torah. This is true. However, the Rishonim say an unbelievable thing, a beautiful thing, and they say as follows: the Asu Siyag L'Torah is an instruction to us as individuals. The Anshe Knesset Gdola weren't telling us. This is an instruction to a yid. It's not an instruction to the rabbis. An instruction to me. How am I supposed to make a siyag for Torah? How do I make a fence for Torah? How do I do that? The rabbis make a fence and I just follow. The answer is mished. That's not the way it works. Here's how it works. Every yid has their own place, their own part, their own chelek in Torah that they own and they need to develop. And every single one of us is born with strengths and weaknesses. We know what our strengths are. We know what our weaknesses is. We know what our weaknesses are. And they vary. They change. As we go through life, weeks, months, years, things are always, I'm good in this, and then I become weaker, I'm stronger. And then a decade later, I might have a relapse from something which is not really a relapse, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu just sent me another Yetzer Hara, that I thought I was doing pretty good in, and now the Yetzer Hara got a little smarter, and is trying to knock me down a little bit later in life like that. Yeah, there's always things for us to consider. The Asu Siyag L'Torah means we need to be very crafty in protecting our own Torah. So if Menachem Tendler knows that I am struggling in a particular area of Yiddishkeit, I have the right, and I should, make my own fences. Even if other people think it's meshuggah, even if people think I'm nuts. Asu siyag l'Torah. A person needs to know their strengths, know their weaknesses, and protect what it is. So if a person struggles with Lashon Hara, how do you make a siyag? Well, for some people, their siyag might be, I don't talk from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. every day. Somebody else hears about that. Like, oh, tell me you're such a frummy. Oh, you're frummy. Yeah, the Torah doesn't want you to keep your mouth shut. The Torah wants that you should say positive things. So instead of being makabel to not talk at all, why don't you be makabel to only say positive things between 1 and 3 o'clock? And you know what the answer is? First of all, it ain't none of your business. And second of all, I know myself, and I don't need to tell this to the person, but I know myself that if I were to start talking, I'm going to relapse back to Lashon Hara. So I have a right to look like a Meshuggah fanatic. Other people think I'm crazy, but I know it's not. I know I have a weakness. Somebody else has a weakness with the stealing. Somebody else might have a weakness with morality, things that they're addicted to. What do you? I stay away from something. Well, you're being such a fanatic about it for. No, you don't even need a response. It's nobody's business. But we should protect our Torah, even if it looks funny to other people. Even if it looks funny. Once we know ourselves, asu siyag l'Torah. It's so important that we're true to who we are, protect what we have, which includes our own individualized makom, our chelek, our place in Torah. And be'ezras Hashem, next week on Monday night at 8:45, we will pick up from Mishna Beis. That is the end of today's shir. I cannot believe we're at about 45 minutes already. I felt like I just started. If anybody has any questions or discussion, please feel free to add in now.